E3 is dead, probably for good, but I hope not. I don't know about you guys, but for me, E3 represents a fun part of my childhood. It was always incredibly fun when E3 would happen to click onto YouTube that day, that weekend, whatever, and see all of the new trailers that had just released. It was always cool to stay up late with your friends and make sure that you were there for the live streams if there was one. Now, I'll be honest, despite how into gaming I am, I have no idea when gaming news comes out, where gaming news comes from. Gaming news just seems to happen these days. So you might be wondering, why is E3 cancelled? What even is E3, you might be wondering, because some of you guys that are watching this might be young enough that E3 hasn't been relevant since you've been, well, sentient. So in short, E3 used to be a games expo where all the different companies in the gaming industry would go and show off their latest technology, so for example the new consoles, or their latest games. But over the years, especially since the world shut down a couple of years ago for a certain reason that can't be named, E3 went downhill. Various different companies just stopped showing up, and sometimes it was the big companies. For example, if Microsoft decided they were not going to E3, oh dear. If Sony, Nintendo, you simply can't have the world's biggest gaming convention without having the world's biggest gaming companies be bothered to turn up. And I suppose it probably makes sense because, let's be honest, they didn't need to anymore. Sony can just release their own trailers their own way and do it without paying for it, because I'm not sure how E3 worked, but I'm familiar with how expos in the fitness world work, and companies will pay a lot of money for a stand at, for example, Body Power. And once a company gets big enough that they don't need to care, they don't even need to go. There is a reason, for example, that in fitness world that Gymshark often doesn't go to Body Power or the Arnold Expo anymore. And that's kind of what happened here in gaming world, where the big companies just stopped bothering. So there was no reason for E3 to exist. It wasn't its own fault, it's just something that happened with the progression of the internet, I suppose. I'm curious though, what do you guys think about E3 being cancelled? Is this a bad thing? Is this a good thing? Are you indifferent? Do you have any good memories because of E3? Comment down below. And if you haven't already, make sure you've liked this video. I suppose you can't blame the various different companies that decided to stop going to E3, because at the end of the day, the thing they care the most about is making money, making the sale. And when it comes to things like E3, they're not in complete control over their own marketing and therefore their own ability to make a sale. These companies don't have control over how the presentations happen. So these days they can just make their own presentation, present it in their own way, in their own space, and have full control over it. And these days, another big part of it, influencers. Often big companies will just go, here Ninja, here, name someone else. Support our game, talk about it, get the hype going. Back in the day, before this was quite as big of a deal as it is now, before there was quite as much market capital involved, E3 was like the biggest thing. E3 would be something that everybody looked forward to. Every year, E3 would roll around, and all my favourite like games journalists and things like that would go. There was a time where Angry Joe, you might know of that name, would go and just go and have interviews with people, usually causing a bit of drama with people he didn't get along with very well, but it was great fun to watch. I tell you what was the biggest problem with E3 though, is games being announced long before they're actually ready to be released. For example, one of the ones that I can remember really well this happening to is a game called Sleeping Dogs. A lot of you guys may have heard of it. It was announced years before it came out. One that's, I suppose, here's a better example, one that's going to happen, or one game that's coming out rather soon, Dead Island 2. Dead Island 2 was announced like 8-9 years ago, something like that. I'm pretty sure the trailer for Dead Island 2 came out in 2014. And yet here we are in 2023 and the game is still not out. Although, saying that, it is coming out in just under a month. I'll be doing a playthrough of it, so you guys better be paying attention to that. Love you. But often, multiple E3s would go by and games still wouldn't have been released. And having a hype train that lasts that long is a good way to have that hype train die out. It still happens today, where games get announced and they're not released for years after the fact. A good example of a game right now that's having that happen, Marvel's Wolverine game. Do you guys even know about that? In the same vein as Marvel's Spider-Man exists, there is a Marvel's Wolverine game in production, and yet we know nothing about it, nor when it's coming, but something we do know is the fact that it is coming and that it does exist, and I almost wish we didn't, or at least until closer to the time. Another big game that this happened to, Elden Ring. Elden Ring was announced so far in advance of it actually coming out that for a while people were questionable over whether it was ever going to come out. So I suppose it just goes to show that as time went on, E3 became more and more redundant. Companies stopped bothering to go and just started announcing their own games way ahead of time in their own space. where they didn't need to be bothered about the constraints of E3, where people didn't even have to physically go because they'll just live stream it these days. At the end of the day, as with everything in life, it will just have come down to money. And yet another thing from my youth that is possibly gone forever. It's not officially announced that E3 is gone forever, but I would not be surprised. What do you guys think? Do you think E3 is coming back? Comment down below and let me know. Anyway, thank you for watching. I hope you all stay and watch some more videos. Go and click some of these links, and I will see you later.